Good morning, and thank you all very much indeed for coming. I'm slightly overwhelmed, as we normally have sort of about 20 for our remembrance service, so it's absolutely fabulous to see so many of you here, and I hope that you are going to enjoy this very special service.
When after the Great War, people read the names on the war memorial, both here in Hintlesham and in Chattisham, a face, a memory, perhaps even a voice came into their heads. With the passage of time, we've lost touch with those memories and with those men. This Remembrance Sunday, we reintroduce you to the men who died in the Great War and are listed on our village war memorials.
I was born here, in Hintlesham, and I sat, like you, in these very pews. In the summer of 1914, I went to war. I went with my mate, Orlando. We'd only been in France a week or two. Private Charles L. Green, killed in action, 26th August 1914, aged 34.
We Suffolks stood and fell shoulder to shoulder at a place called Locato. Nearly 8,000 of us were killed, injured or missing. Private Orlando Lloyd, killed in action, 26th of August 1914, aged 28.
My sister Charlotte and I were brought up by my grandmother on the road to Raiden. They said it would be over by Christmas, and it was for me. Private Charles Chaplin, killed in action, 20th of December 1914, aged 20.
I enlisted at the outbreak of the war. My army pals called me Harry. I was still a teenager when a Jerry sniper lined me up in his sights. Private Henry Thomas Tricker, killed in action, 20th of March 1915, aged 19.
Before the war, I worked on a farm in Chattisham. We'd been in France a month, and one night we were advancing against the enemy, but someone forgot to tell our artillery who shelled us. Private George Chilvers, killed in action, 24th of April 1915, aged 22.
My father was vicar here, and my brothers and I sang in the choir. I emigrated to Australia and ended up fighting Johnny Turk at Gallipoli. Private Clarence Wilkinson died 5th of May 1915 and buried at sea, aged 29.
I went to school just down the road and was as proud as Punch to join the Suffolks. I arrived in France on the 18th of May 1915 and I was in the trenches at the place called the Wipers. Private John Squirrel, killed in action, 25th of May 1915, aged 30.
I was born in Hintlesham and married to Ellen with a son called Harold. Before the war I was a farm labourer and then joined the Suffolks. I died in 1915, but my remains lay undiscovered for 9 years. Private Edwin Muller, killed in action 1st of October 1915, aged 29.
I was born in Washbrook and served as a stoker on board the dreadnought HMS Queen Mary. When the German torpedoes struck, they say our ship was vaporised, and me and 1,300 shipmates were lost at Jutland. Stoker First Class Marcus Stewart died 31st of May 1916, aged 27.
I married my sweetheart Ellen May here on Christmas Day 1912, and my son Horace was born the following December. I was the first Hintlesham man killed on the Somme. Private Horace Gant, killed in action 13th of July 1916, aged 30.
I was one of 10 children. The family farmed in Chattisham and lived in Duke Street. Like so many others, I fought and died on the Somme. Private James Vince died of his wounds 8th of August 1916, aged 28.
My father was a watchmaker. We lived in George Street. I went into Ipswich to enlist and joined the Suffolks. I ended up in the killing fields of the Somme. Private Albert Game, killed in action 18th of August 1916, aged 24.
There's a huge memorial to those of us killed on the Somme, but who have no known grave. It's a place called Thiepval. There are 72,000 names on that memorial, including mine. Private Thomas Gant, killed in action, 26th of September 1916, aged 19.
My father made coffins and wheels, and we lived on the back road. I was the fifth and final fatality from Hintlesham killed on the Somme. Private Percy Ellis, killed in action, 3rd of November 1916, aged 21.
I was a Londoner before moving to tranquil Suffolk, where I worked as a gardener. In France, I served as a gunner. Gunner George Marsh died 9th of April 1917, aged 32.
In 1916, Lord Kitchener said to our country needed me, so I left the farm and horses in Chattisham and signed up. I was ready for the big offensive. They never found my body. Private Samuel Whittle, killed in action on the first day of the Battle of Passchendaele on 31st July 1917, aged 32.
The family lived at Chapel House before I headed off to Cumbria to work as a gardener. I returned to Suffolk just before the war and lived with my sister. Gunner James Whiting, killed in action, 24th of August 1917, aged 33.
My family lived in Hintlesham, where my father and brother worked the horses on a farm. In Flanders, I drove the horses that pulled the heavy guns. Private Arthur Green died 8th November 1917, aged 25.
Mother and father lived on Duke Street and I joined up in 1911. In 1916 we were far away fighting the Hun in East Africa. Gunner Frank Green died in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania on the 1st of December 1917, aged 26.
I was a Chattisham boy, and before the war, I was an apprentice motor car bodybuilder. I spent 2 years fighting in France before my number was up. Private George Rumsey died 13th of January 1918, aged 32.
This is where I was baptised, exactly 125 years ago. I was a stockman and married Eva May and made courses in Hadley. In 1961, I answered the call. Private Sidney Morris Green, killed in action, 28th of March 1918, aged 24.
I was born in Chattisham, but the family soon moved to Canada. At the outbreak of war, my brothers and I immediately came back to England and were amongst the first in France. Private Harry Thorpe, killed in action, 31st of March 1918, aged 32.
We lived at Cobbler's Corner. I enlisted in Ipswich and joined the Suffolks. We were all together then, and 36 of our Suffolk lads lay together now in a small cemetery in France. Private Hyam Pearson, killed in action, 19th of April 1918, age 32.
I was one of 8 children living on George Street. I married Agatha and joined up to serve in the Suffolks. However, I died of my wounds in South Staffordshire uniform. Private Frederick John Green died 6 May 1918, aged 25.
Before the war, I was a groom in Coddenham. I married Alice in 1914 and our son Cyril was born the following summer. I enlisted in Ipswich and was sent to fight Austrians in northern Italy. Private Horace Eastle, killed in action, 15th of June 1918, aged 31.
My mother Alice and stepfather John Leeks brought me up. On leaving school, I worked on the farm. Who would have thought I would ever come to France? Private Frank William Green died from his wounds, 25th of September 1918, aged 21.
I was one of 7 children in Hintlesham. Before the war, I worked as a hammerman in a foundry. In France, I was awarded the military medal and nearly made it to the end. Sergeant Frederick Cuthbert, killed in action 30 October 1918, aged 30.
Hintlesham was home before emigrating to Australia, where I joined up. In the trenches, I was a company runner and had to dodge snipers' bullets. I was awarded the military medal for that. On Armistice Day, I was in a French hospital being treated for a head wound. Private Jack Gant died of his wounds, 19th of November 1918, aged 31.
I was born here and worked as a footman at Long Melford Hall, Constantinople, and was occupied after the Armistice, and that's where I ended up with the Norfolk Regiment. Sergeant Wesley Green died in the Black Sea General Hospital on New Year's Eve 1919, aged 30.
After the war, I came home to Hintlesham, where I was born, where I worked as a gardener and where my wife Gertrude was waiting. Although I survived the war, I returned with deep physical and mental scars. They buried me in the shadow of the war memorial. Private Wilfred Green, my great-grandfather, died 26th of April 1924, aged 32.
We will remember them.